In this video, I'll show you how to use the custom user modes in a Nikon Z camera. Custom user modes are extremely useful when you want to change multiple settings all at once. But how do you actually use them in the field, and do these custom modes stay the same all the time? I'll share that at the end, so make sure you stick around. Let's have a look. My name is Peter Bredeldam and I'm a nature photographer. Follow along as I share my hard-earned lessons in landscape, wildlife and macro photography. Once you've found the base settings that work for you and your type of photography, you will want to dial in those settings and save them as a custom user mode. The next time you do that particular type of photography, you can easily change all the settings at once. No more forgetting which settings you used the last time, and no more fumbling around while the subject or the moment disappears. It has saved me in so many situations that I had a good starting point with settings I know work once I switch them on. I don't expect you to copy these exact settings that I'll show you, as they might not fit your way of shooting. However, I'll just tell you what I set. So let's set it up on an Nikon Z camera. First of all, I'll switch to manual, then I'll dial in a shutter speed of around 1,000 of a second. When it comes to aperture, I use the sweet spot of my lens, and I suggest you do the same, or as wide open as you prefer to shoot. Then I switch on auto ISO, and the focus mode I set to animal tracking. When I'm moving to a location, I usually have my camera ready. So this means I'm not on a tripod, so I have vibration reduction turned on until I get to the location where I'll probably set up a hide or something, or I'll stay put for a while. I don't actually switch it off when I'm on a tripod, but in case that's an issue, I suggest that you start with it on, and then when you do wildlife photography on a tripod, you can always switch it off. I want to be as silent as possible when I do wildlife photography, so therefore I switch silent photography on. So far so good. Now it's time to save the settings. To do that, go into the menu and enter the setup menu. Select user settings, save user settings, and U1. For user mode 2, I have it set to macro photography, which is a whole other way of shooting. And it's crucial that you don't forget to set a single thing. So these are the settings I would enter in user mode 2. I most often use a flash, and this goes into the settings as well. I have the camera in manual mode, set the shutter speed to 1/250th of a second, because it's the flash sync speed. I usually shoot with an aperture around f11, so I'll set that. ISO 400, I think it's a good starting point with macro photography. Now, to enable flash at all, you need to make sure that the silent photography mode is turned off. About the focus, I use a single point focus most of the time for macro photography, because I like to just rock back and forth to get the subject in focus. That's a particular method used for macro photography. So in this case, single focus point works the best for me. Go to the setup menu and choose user settings, save user settings, and U2. Now, every time you want to do macro photography, all you have to do is switch to user mode 2. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you want to improve as a nature photographer, consider subscribing to the channel. Let's move on to setting up user mode 3. I use this for landscape photography, and when I do landscape photography, I usually have the camera on a tripod. A good starting point is a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second and aperture f8, and with as low as ISO as your camera is able of. So let's set it to ISO 100. You can disable vibration reduction here when you are on a tripod, but I've never had issues with it so far, so this is up to you. Again, I would use single focus point for landscape photography. So let's save these settings. There are actually more possibilities with the user modes. You can save both video and photography settings under each user mode. So for example, I have 24 frames per second with face tracking focus mode saved under U1, and 1/50th of a second at f4 and ISO 800, which is the base N-Log ISO for this camera. For user mode 2, I have it at 60 frames per second, so I can do some cool slow motion shots with a shutter speed of 120th of a second, f4, and again ISO 800, and with a small focus area in full-time autofocus. And the way you set it up for video is exactly the same. So if you already entered some settings into U1, switch to user mode 1 and switch to video and change the settings, and then save the user settings again. Now, if you have the habit of turning the camera off to save battery life, you'll experience that the camera starts back at your default settings for the user mode that you're in. So if you have adapted your settings to the current location and light conditions, I suggest that you update the user modes to reflect that. And not to confuse you, but at times, if for instance I shoot wildlife for a longer period of time in a hide, I might actually change the settings. So the user mode 2 is also used for wildlife. But instead of having animal tracking, I might change the Nikon Z6 user mode settings to using a single focus point and change it to DX mode and change the exposure compensation. So then I can quickly switch between U1 and U2 depending on what type of subject it is and where it is in the scene. At the end of the day, I'll then quickly reset the settings of U1, U2 and 3 back to my preferred starting points. Even though the settings are mainly stationary, I often end up using them a little more dynamic and adapt them to the situation. However, if you don't want to do that, if it ends up confusing you, don't do it. Actually, in many situations, you'd be better off just using one of the custom function buttons. If you change multiple settings to get the settings right for a shooting scenario, the user modes is the way to go. If you want to know more about the other settings I use for nature photography, I suggest that you take a look at this video up here. I guess I'll see you over there. Take care.